Hey everybody, this is Nate with the TackleTime podcast. Tonight we're going to change it up. We're going to dedicate pretty much an entire episode to one fish species, which has been on my radar for a while, but I haven't really dug in and actually done the work and got out there and the experience with it, and that is muskie. So I think muskie for many people is an elusive, very hard to catch, but very desirable fish to go after. So we're going to talk about that tonight. Ryan, I think, can really give us a good intro in case you're interested. We'll have Ryan Reed on tonight, and I think he can give us a really great intro to what it is to start musky fishing, what you need to know, and some resources to get started. So that's all in this episode, which is really good. So I think you'll really like it. I know I did. It was great to learn. So I got to say, before you go and buy any of the tackle we're going to talk about tonight, go to tacklebuys.com. Check it out. We host thousands of sale listings across the web, which are updated almost daily for gear that you already like or new gear that you want to check out. If you have a rod that you want to get, if you have a reel that you're into, if you want to get certain bait or tackle, whatever it is, before you go and buy it and before you go pay full price somewhere, check out tacklebuys.com. So we're going to go ahead and jump right in. Alrighty, guys. We have a really interesting guy on tonight, a fellow PA fisherman here with me tonight. We got Ryan Reed on with us. Ryan, say hello.
Hey guys, what's up? Thanks for having me on, Nate. Appreciate it.
This gonna be awesome. Well, we're talking about muskie. We're gonna talk about YouTube. We're gonna talk about all kinds of good stuff. So Ryan, I always like to start every single episode with a question, and the one I have for you is, what is your earliest fishing memory?
Earliest fishing memory. Oh, man, I can tell you, I mean, my dad had me out there pretty early. I would say probably the earliest memory I have would be fishing trout at Twin Lakes. We used to go out for the opener, Twin Lakes in Greensburg. He would take me out, and it was just a lot of good memories doing that. But young kid, he had us out there fishing, so those were good memories for me growing up, and kind of transitioned me in some other fishing as well. So,
Oh, cool.
good stuff.
Like what? What'd you get into after that?
Oh, well, it's like just like anybody else, you have there's a path that you can take and just about anything. But with fishing, started off just throwing a worm in a bobber, again, young kid. And that kind of led, as I got older, that kind of led me into other areas, really trying to figure out artificial baits and trying to understand different species of fish. And I pretty much got into bass fishing, pretty hardcore after that. And I spent years doing that. And I did that with my brother and my dad, for years. So, it's like, it's good when parents get their kids out there, at a young age, because fishing can teach you a lot of lessons about life in general, patience being number one. So, that's one of those things. I was thankful for those opportunities when I was younger growing up, and, thankful for my dad taking us out and sharing those experiences with us.
Patience and perseverance. That's I think the two keys to this game.
Yeah, for sure. You can't, you got to have patience when you're out there fishing, especially for muskies. So,
No, that's what we're talking about tonight. That's going to be our focus. Now, I know I've been watching you on YouTube for a little while now, and I know you have a pretty good channel. Can you tell everybody listening, what you like to focus on, what your YouTube channel's about, and all that?
Yeah, YouTube was kind of one of those things where I had multiple people reaching out to me. Everybody in my personal life knows how passionate I am about fishing. I also like to teach, so I kind of started the channel on the premise of just doing it for fun, a way to be able to track video footage that I've done throughout the year. And then it kind of quickly turned into, sharing what I'm learning about the sport. And it kind of started off with just anything, whether that's a specific bait or something about a specific species. I've done some biology stuff here and there. I've done lake breakdown stuff. People had reached out to me and asked me, hey, like, how do you learn about lakes? Like, what's the best way to break down a lake? And honestly, like, I have no idea. I don't own a boat, but guys with electronics can go out there and do it with your graph. There's maps available. There's all this information everywhere. So I decided to give that a try. And do as much research as I could online. You know, a lot of this stuff is out there and available. PA Fish and Boat. I personally, you know, think they do a great job in a lot of different areas, especially with the hatcheries, but they also do a great job with their documentation. You know, they've got structure maps available out there for you to go and look at, like the fish habitat improvement plan. So, you know, those are really good starting points when you want to learn about a lake and what structure is in a lake. So that's kind of where it started for me now. So I basically just share things that I'm learning throughout the year, you know, sharing footage of trips and things like that. And it's fun to look back on. So that's YouTube for me. You know, it's all about having fun. It's about making memories with friends and family and sharing that with others. So as long as it stays fun, we'll keep doing it.
No, that's awesome. How long have you been doing it?
This is my third year. I tried the first year I started, I wasn't real confident in myself. So it was hit or miss, but I really started going hard about 2 years ago. And, you know, and it's one of those things where I'm not putting out a video every week, you know, just like everyone else, we're extremely busy human beings. You know, we've got families, we've got jobs, you know, working. And so it's still a hobby for me. You know, it's when I have time, and I do a lot of fishing. So when I have footage and I feel like doing a video, I put it up there, and hopefully, you know, it's beneficial to people, and, you know, hopefully some people get a laugh out of the chaos that is fishing PA with Ryan Reed.
That's awesome, man. No, I can, I can, I feel what you mean. You know, that's cool. It's got to be fun. It's got to be enjoyable. And I think everybody likes to learn, especially in this sport. There's so much to learn. You can fish for 10 lifetimes and still barely scratch the surface. So that's cool. That's cool. One of my favorite videos, I even mentioned it to you, was your lake breakdown of High Point, which is up near the Youghiogheny. And I thought you did a great job with that. So, I mean, if, you know, maybe we can just touch on that real quick, you know, as far as the lake breakdown. If somebody's going to a lake that they've never known before, and obviously, you know, every state's going to be different. I know we have, like you said, we have some good resources here in PA. I'm sure there's some other decent ones in other states, but, you know, how would you recommend somebody kind of just start that process? What do you think they ought to do?
I mean, the biggest thing is just, you know, doing the research to figure it out. You know, that was my mission, is to put all this information into a video. But anytime that you want to learn something, you know, whether it's about a lake or, you know, what a specific things about structure, like there's times where I've had people reach out to me and say, what is a porcupine crib? Well, there's a lot of information out there. You can go out online and you can read about this stuff and understand the process. So, I mean, I think the biggest thing when you want to learn a lake, you know, if you're like me, if you don't have a boat, if you don't have electronics, the best way to do it is to read as much as you can. Try to find those resources and then put it together. And when you do get out there on a boat, you know, that really helps you kind of figure out the areas. And then you work with your electronics the best you can. You know, you find weed edges, you find rock humps, you find those structure points when you're out there fishing, you know, and guys will sometimes tell me, hey, you know, that map you did, that was really good, but that structure's a little off. Well, longitude, latitude, sometimes it's not going to be perfect. You know, I'm doing this on my computer. So it's one of those things. It's more of a guide. I mean, you guys still have to get out there and fish. You know, we all have to get out there and fish, and you have to spend time on the water, and that's what it's about. You can't really learn a lake unless you're out there on it. So time on the water is probably the next biggest thing, you know, aside from research.
That is a constant repeated theme here, is a matter of just getting out there, trial and error, figure out what works, I mean, so it's always something that continuously comes up. Every single one of the interviews that I do, it's always the same thing. So it's like, for anybody listening, you just have to go out there and try it, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know we want to talk about Musky tonight. What you mentioned, what you want to talk about tonight was, you know, kind of what you learned, you know, digesting a little bit of that, and how that, you know, everybody listening might be able to benefit from that. So, you know, what do you got? I'm sure you picked up some good tricks along the year.
Yeah. So last year I fished for Musky a lot. We went out a lot of different trips. I spent a lot of time in New York, spent some time in PA, and I just wasn't getting the results. You know, you're spending hours and hours on the water. You know, we're talking 12, 14-hour days a lot of times. And, You want to be able to catch fish. Well, musky fishing is not like bass fishing. You've got to put a lot of time and effort in. There's certain key elements. So one of my focuses this year was to just try to be a better fisherman. And the ways you can do that is learning more about the fish, focusing on the fish and things like what they eat, where do they live? Where do they spawn? Where are they going to be certain times of the year? And I was able to do that. And really one of the biggest resources for me personally, and this goes for any species of fish, there's a lot of different clubs out there. Clubs, some of these clubs, they're great resources. You have access to people. You have access to tons of information from guys that have been doing it for years and years and years. Muskies Inc., Chapter 16 in Pittsburgh. It's a Pittsburgh area. It's a collection of muskie fishermen here in Western Pennsylvania. Muskies Inc. has a number of clubs across the state and across the country. And the primary focus is, basically it's a group of people that want to take care of the fish. So we talk about conservation. Muskies Inc. does a lot for the fisheries. Three Rivers, the Three Rivers chapter here in Pittsburgh, we work with PA Fish and Boat, and we use what's called the Minnow Fund. So we raise money throughout the year, and we help the fish and boat hatcheries with minnows. So minnows go in to feed the fish that are basically being stocked throughout the year. So Muskies Inc., again, it's been a huge deal for me because it was a club I could join. There's access to guys that have been doing this for a long time. They have tools like the lunge log. A lunge log is basically a giant database of fish catches. So you can go on there and you can see what the top lures for a lake are. You could see, how many numbers of fish have been caught over the years. And there's just like hundreds of thousands of fish catches on there. So
wow,
Muskies Inc. has really cut the learning curve for me. Going to their meetings, talking to these guys and learning. And then you form relationships with people and you talk to them throughout the week. It's a close-knit community, and that's a really great way, to cut the learning curve. So I wanted to make sure I talked about that because Muskies Inc. has really been responsible for my success this year, hands down, and talking to guys from the club. So that was my mission. It was to learn more about the fish, understand the fish better, and use these resources to be a better muskie fisherman in 2020. I don't know that I'm any better of a fisherman, but I can tell you I've caught more fish this year. So, definitely it speaks volumes to at least my season.
No, that's awesome. If I remember, are they planning on having a show coming beginning of next year? Is that in Canonsburg?
Yeah. So that is the Muskie Max. That's run by Sean Leopardi. That is also a great resource for people that want to come out and actually see the muskie world. You don't have to be a muskie fisherman to come out to Muskie Max. There's seminars, there's tons of vendors there with products, and you can, look at this stuff in person, talk to guides, things like that, set up guide trips. It's a really, really awesome show. It's my favorite show. I've been to a couple around the country. My favorite show, probably just because it's, at home. But
yeah.
We have a tremendous amount of bait makers in the state of Pennsylvania. A lot of people don't realize that. We've got just any style of lure that you could want and use in the state of PA. We've got bait makers for, and some legends. I don't know if you've ever heard of Dale Wiley. Dale Wiley is really well known in the community across the country, and he's been doing it for 30, 40 years. So it's just, it's good. It's a good time. This is actually probably the best time to be a muskie fisherman because this is the best our fisheries have been maybe ever. So, all these great bait makers and lots more fish, there's a lot of resources out there to learn as well.
It was interesting as I begin to network with people and talk and, we do interviews and that it's interesting to realize how many independent bait makers there are. I mean, obviously everybody knows the big brands, but there's small lure makers, there's people that make their own baits. I mean, there is so much out there, there's just so much variety and tons of independent shops that are making really good quality products from what I can tell. So no, you're right. You're totally right. And I'm sure there's tons of them here in PA that I don't even know about. So But no, that's you're right. I'm gonna have to check out some of the clubs, especially Muskie's Inc. I mean, that's awesome. Especially being so close to home, that's going to be a really great resource, at least for me.
Yeah, and that's the thing. If anybody's really interested in learning about muskies, muskie fishing, or getting into the sport, I mean, that's the best way is to join Muskies Inc., join a local chapter near you, and go network. I mean, those guys will take you fishing. You know, I've experienced that firsthand, and you learn so much. So it is really good.
So, what were some of the things that I know, obviously, through joining that club, I'm sure you picked up some tricks, some different
Mm-hmm.
techniques. What are some of the things that you picked up on this year?
This year, I mean, this has been a huge leap for me. So last year, I went from catching 3 fish all year. Right now, I'm sitting at 19 fish for the season.
Nice, nice.
Now, the more I learn, the more I realize that there are guys in the state of PA that are catching 50, 60, 70, 80 fish a year. It all depends on where you fish, and it depends on how much time you put on the water.
For sure.
But some of the things I've learned, to really, again, to focus on the fish, like knowing that there's a time where these fish come in to spawn, and they come in shallow. And then there's also areas right in our backyard that these fish will come in shallow during certain times of the year, and it makes it really accessible from shore. The first 7 or 8 fish I caught this year were from shore.
Oh, okay.
And I always heard that it was really hard to catch a muskie from shore. Well, if you know and you understand the fish and you can find these areas where they're living, it makes it a lot easier. And it makes sense, but I've gone days and days and days on the water without seeing a fish, make some adjustments based off of what I've learned this year. And all of a sudden, I'm seeing 10, 12 fish in a day. So,
okay.
It's one of those things. I mean, I think one of the key elements to fishing early in the year, and I'm talking like winter, I'll say like January, February, March for me, this year has been throwing smaller baits. You'll hear guys talk about downsizing. I've seen guys quote unquote downsize a bait, and they're going from like maybe a 7-inch whatever, to like a 5-inch whatever. But the one thing I learned is to actually start throwing small bass jerk baits.
Oh, okay.
For example, Cabela's used to make this little 4.5-inch jerk bait. I started throwing these smaller baits in that colder water, and it started producing more fish for me. That was a huge deal this year because for the first couple of months, and I only got out a few times through January, February, 3, 4, 5 fish. That's a pretty good start to the year, considering you're fishing in winter.
Yeah, sure.
But, even into that March, April, May bite, some of those smaller baits still work. So I think taking an approach almost like bass fishing, in that early season can really produce a lot more fish. So that was one thing that I learned to adjust. And then, of course, when you throw smaller baits, you've got to work on different types of gear. Funny thing is I went out and bought Gander Mountain recently closed end of last year out here my way here in Greensburg. And I ended up picking up like 2 ugly sticks. They were just like 7-footers, medium heavy. I threw some 50-pound braid on there. And I can tell you that those things have made a huge difference for me in cold water, because if you throw smaller baits, you want to make sure you're matching that gear up. I can't throw those smaller baits with my big musky rod. So
sure.
That's just little things like that. And, things that I wouldn't normally think about, talking to guys and then kind of making it my own has helped me catch more fish this year. So yeah, I would say that's a huge tip for me. Just to downsize your baits and almost go to like a bass style fishing early in the season.
Gotcha. Okay. No, that's good info. That's great info. Yeah, for sure. You have something that's working out there for you now?
Yeah. So we've done a lot of trolling this year. There's always this like struggle in my mind. Like, what do I want to do today? Do I want to cast? Do I want to troll? If I'm going out fishing with somebody else, that decision is usually made for me. So that's kind of a good thing, because then I can take and prep for that day, and kind of decide which baits I want to take, what rods, so on and so forth. But I can tell you, like, trolling this year has been a way different experience for me. We have spent hundreds and hundreds of hours trolling for muskies. and, not getting a single rip, not catching a single fish, start to wonder what we're doing wrong. And I think one of the biggest things that we did a couple years ago that started producing was changing the speed in which we troll.
Okay.
Some guys will tell you go 5 miles per hour, 5.5. Some guys will tell you to go 3.5. I have found that we went from like that 3 to 3.5 range, and we bumped up to like 4 to 4.5, like 4 miles per hour to 4.5 miles per hour when you're trolling seems to produce more fish. The other thing with that is whenever we get cold fronts, or the water starts cooling down, it's sometimes you want to go a little bit slower. I would say maybe like that 3.5 to 4 range. I had an experience this year where we had a cold front in summer, and what we did was we ended up slowing down, and as soon as we slowed down, the rod went off. So we went from that 4.5 to like 3.8. So, trolling, it's kind of funny because trolling's super technical. I'll admit that when we first started trolling, it was kind of like just chuck a bait out of the back of the boat and just like take a boat ride for 12 hours. Trolling is not that simple. I mean, it is actually pretty difficult at times. And really what you have to understand with trolling is, like, if you say you want to start fishing for muskies and you want to troll, you've got to understand the gear, number one. Like, how are you going to troll? What kind of rod holders, how many rods. In PA you can run 3 rods a person. There's all these different setups. So when you're looking at your own boat and things like that, you've got to work through all that and figure out what gear you want. For me, if I go out with somebody, everybody I fish with usually has those types of things, like the rod holders and all the spread and all that stuff. Track techs, I don't know if you've ever heard of that, the track on the side of boats.
Yeah.
So really there's an understanding. You've got to understand the gear, but then you've got to understand your bait selection. One of the biggest mistakes I made musky fishing or getting into the sport was going out and buying all these baits, like just random baits. Like you can get yourself into a frenzy, like looking at all of these products and stuff out there, and you're just buying up all this stuff, and like half of the baits that I bought that first year, I didn't even know how to use them. Like, I was buying glide baits and I was trying to like jerk them. I had no idea what I was doing. So I dumped all this, like you just dump all this money into the sport thinking, oh, that looks so cool. I want that bait, or I want that lure. I want, and the biggest thing with any baits is understanding how to use them. And instead of going berserk buying all these different baits, like start with a handful of baits, maybe like 3-4 baits, buy a couple different colors and focus on using them. So to kind of take that back, like that was a huge help for me this year, because I decided I only wanted to troll with, local bait makers to PA. Maybe New York, Ohio. There's a couple of really good bait makers in New York and Ohio that I'll have in my spread, but it's understanding the lure. Like, what depth does this thing run? Because the other technical thing about trolling is you've got to understand, like, if I let 20 feet of line out, how deep is that lure going to run?
Sure.
And that was the thing that was lost on me for the first couple of years, is I didn't really understand that. So then, you take in with trolling, you've got the gear, you've got to understand the baits that you're putting out there, and how different line affects those baits, different leaders, things like that. And then once you get them back, you got to go back to understanding the fish. Where are these fish at in the column? And that's the chess game. That's why it's called fishing, right? You go out and you fish. I'll give you an example, like, just to try to tie some of this in, and hopefully this makes sense to you, and anybody that's listening. But like, we had a scenario recently where, we're in September now. We're starting to get some colder nights. The water temps were pretty warm, but they cooled off pretty quick.
Yeah.
Well, the one thing we noticed, we were trolling like 13 to 15 feet of water on this one specific lake, and we just weren't getting any results for like 5-6 hours. And we started thinking about the fish, and it's like, well, the water's a little bit cooler. Maybe those fish moved up shallow to get warm. Just a thought, so we went back shallow, and within the last 2 hours we boated 3 fish, one of which was a 49 3/4.
Wow.
So, it's, it's one of those things where, if you go back to trying to understand what the fish is doing, sometimes they're like humans, they get cold, they want to go warm up. And sometimes you'll see that in spring too. But, that's why you got to go out and fish. But trolling can be technical like that. You're not just throwing a bait out of the back of the boat.
Yeah, for sure.
And driving around. So I know that was a lot of me talking there. So I apologize.
No, you know what? No, seriously, that is all good. I mean, everything you said there is something that you have to take in mind. I mean, you're fishing, you're kind of playing the odds, or whatever you want to call it, where you have to put all these variables together. They all have to match the right way if you want success. You have to put in the right inputs to get the right output. Which is reeling a fish in and getting in the boat. So, if they're not at a certain depth, putting a lure there ain't gonna help you. So sometimes you have to try new things. And I think that's another constant theme that comes up for us is, when something isn't working, you got to change up. For whatever reason, your current setup isn't working, just as you said, the water temperature cools down, or, they've moved in closer to shore, whatever, that's, yet again, it just comes back to one of those things where you have to put the time in and try and figure it out for sure.
Yeah. And it's a constant learning curve. I mean, I'm never going to be what I would consider good at musky fishing because there's so much to learn. There's so many good fishermen in our area, that have helped me learn a few things this year. But, ultimately, you've got to go out there and spend the time. But just to kind of circle back around, like, again, like the biggest thing I can say about this year, the difference is we're trying to understand the fish and be at the spots where they're coming into certain times of the year, at the right time. Like I'll go back to that spring bite. A lot of guys won't fish during the spawn. Our fish here in PA, they're stocked fish. There's not a lot of natural reproduction happening in our inland waters. We do get some natural reproduction in the rivers, and I'm sure there's some, creeks and streams that get it. But a lot of these fish are being stocked by fish and boat. So, there's this kind of, some guys won't fish in the spring, during that spawn. I'll be honest with you personally, I will fish. I feel like I can handle those fish, get them in and out of the water a lot better than I could probably 2-3 years ago. But you can't get better at that stuff unless you do it.
Sure.
There's elements to holding a fish. And, I've got my first fish this year, I got tore up because I had my thumb in the wrong spot. But if you understand the fish and you get practice doing it, it's going to be one of those things where you're going to get more confident and be better. But that bite during the spawn or leading up to the spawn, that pre-spawn bite, that is really amazing stuff if you're on the right body of water.
Oh, I bet.
There was a day that I was fishing with, so actually one of my friends that I met through Musky's Inc., his name's Tom Banata. He runs Pennsylvania Monsters on Instagram. He lives relatively close to me, but we went up to a lake during the week, like in the spring, and we actually netted like 8 fish. That was the first time, I think, in my life that I had seen that many fish in the net, musky wise, just
Sure.
through the last couple of years. And we had some, I got a personal best fish that day. It was 44 inches.
Wow. Wow.
But, we got a tip, a lot of help from local guys, and you put yourself in those areas where those fish are coming in and you got a chance at getting bit. So, that's the thing, that's the biggest difference for me this year, understanding when to troll shallow, when to troll deep, for these fish. And then sometimes they'll throw you a curve. Like you're not always going to catch them either. There's a lot of days that, well, I'll put it this way. People post things on social media when they're catching fish, but they're not posting when they're not catching, or you might get that random lake shot, on Facebook. But so sometimes, it's hard to gauge, but, I think that's the biggest difference with me this year is understanding the fish, where to be, and then where to start, and then go from there.
So when you're not trolling, what do you typically go for, or what are you normally doing? What's your go-to technique when you're not on out on somebody's boat?
Yeah, casting. I mean, casting's interesting. There's a lot of different baits out there to cast. I'm turning into a jerk bait, a lover of the jerk bait.
Okay.
Something about being able to pause that bait. Some of those baits will go through timber, will go through, weeds and things like that. I mean, I just like that style of fishing, and some of these small streams, it can get really fun, really quick. You get close quarter, a fish will come up and drill your bait right at your feet, standing on the bank, and it's fairly exciting, when that happens. So I do like that jerk bait bite. I like that pause. I started throwing some glide baits around more so this year. I really wanted to learn glide baits and catch a fish. I have been absolutely terrible with glide baits. I had, again, Musky's Inc. member, Mark King in our local area. He makes glide baits. He took me out on the boat. He showed me how to throw his baits, how to work a glide bait. He spent the time with me, gave me a huge step forward. And I really want to get a fish bad on one of his glide baits this year. I'm hoping this fall, winter, I can get it done. But there's a little bit of a learning curve. I do like them. It's a little bit more patience with a glider. It can be a lot of fun too, especially with follows. But bucktails, guys throw a lot of bucktails. We've got bait makers for everything you want to do in PA. I've got, Big O's bucktails. He's been making them for like a year, 2 years. There's a lot of good bait makers just in general. So, when things warm up a little bit, or even in the fall, you might want to throw a bucktail, maybe some topwater. It's really, it just depends on the time of year. I'm learning that you can catch fish on just about anything at the right time.
Sure. So, gotcha. Do you have a typical rod selection you're using when you're going out?
Yeah. So, I mean, gear is one of those things where when you've got a family, you've got a budget, it's
sure. I think everyone can relate to that.
Yeah. And that's one of those things, like, guys, I've done videos on gear. I kind of get away from that now just because of all the feedback I get. The one thing I don't think people realize is, like I said, like, most people have families. Like, you can't just go drop like $900 on a rod. So I've got a couple combos. I use the Abu Garcia C4s. They're not the best reel for casting, but they get it done. This year I actually bought, and those C4s are actually on like Cabela's tourney rods. They're like 8 foot. They're heavy action. I have one sitting over here. I can see it. But this year I kind of transitioned into a St. Croix Musky Mojo with a Dow Alexa. I think that's a 4,000. So a little quicker reel, and I pretty much got that to be able to throw glide baits and bucktails, and it helps to pick the slack up.
Gotcha.
Your line. Gotcha. So there's a lot of gear out there, and a lot of guys will give you their opinion.
Sure.
It's really comfort. It's comfort level. It's what can you get in your price range, and what are you trying to do?
No, and I should have prefaced my question better. Not necessarily the exact gear, but as far as, like a rod recommendation, as far as, using a medium, if it's mostly heavy, that kind of thing. I don't know what you prefer, what you're seeing that actually works better for you.
Yeah, and it depends on the baits. If I'm going to throw like a rubber Medusa, like, I don't know if you know what a Medusa is. It's like
I haven't seen them, no.
Yeah, it's a big rubber bait with tails.
Gotcha.
They have different sizes, different weights of them. I've actually have like a specific rod to throw those bigger rubber baits.
Sure.
I don't do it a lot, but I have a rod for it. I've got a rod that's a little lighter for small crankbaits.
Gotcha.
And that's kind of why the funny thing is with that ugly stick, it really works well, like for small rattle baits, like 1/2 ounce rattle baits. It works well for those small 4.5 inch jerk baits, because the spinning reel on those things, even though they're not like super high end, I mean, you can chuck those little baits like a mile.
Yeah, they go.
And really the rods, they're fairly durable, and like I said, I think I got 7 or 8 fish on that ugly stick this year.
No, they're good pieces. They work well. I mean, people can shit on them all they want, but they're good. Doesn't matter. Yeah,
and that's the thing, is like, I tell people just to look at it, try to figure out what you want to do, and if you have the money to spend it, you'll get it, the lifetime. So if you buy a St. Croix rod, it's going to last you a lot longer, if you take care of it. But not everybody has the money for that. And I happen to get mine on clearance again at Gander Mountain. So it kind of worked out for me. I was there right time. But, it's fishing. There's different tiers to all this stuff, and you just got to be comfortable and feel good about what you're spending on it.
No, you got to be reasonable. You got to, you can't make money on, you got to do what you can. One thing I see in constant discussion, and I never find a consensus on it, so I have to ask, is leader, no leader, what line weight you're using, what do you prefer at this point?
Yeah, I'll give you my preference. I mean, a lot of guys will probably disagree with me, but so I'll start with spring. What I started doing this year, again, winter, spring, the fish are a lot more lethargic. They're not like ramming these baits. I mean, they're literally coming up and nipping at these baits. There's times where they'll just like eat it and just sit there. And sometimes with these little jerk baits, like they don't have real big hooks. So you can't just like swing for the fences with a hook set. It's a lot different than bass fishing. There's times where I just basically, with those smaller, rod combos, I just let them eat it. Well, again, if I'm downsizing my bait, downsizing my rod, I'm going to downsize my leader too, because I don't want to throw like 100-pound fluoro leader. It's going to kill the action of that bait. So my perspective, I'll downgrade to like a 45-pound bass leader for that winter, January, February, March.
Gotcha.
And that's throwing 50-pound braid I have on those rods.
Okay.
Now I just got to fish with a guide service. They fish up on Chautauqua, and I talked to the one gentleman about casting, and he actually uses 50-pound braid on his rods all year round. So I've heard guys say, don't throw anything less than 80. Some guys won't throw less than 100-pound braid. Yeah, if it's me, my opinion, I would throw 50-pound braid in those early months, and then I'd probably bump it up to 80.
Got it. Okay.
So on all my casting rods, I have 80-pound. On my trolling rods, I have 80-pound. We're talking about muskies here. We're not talking about mako sharks. Yeah, they have teeth. Yeah, they're aggressive. Yeah, they can get big, but they're not sharks.
Yeah, sure.
And it's one of those things like I have right now, I think I have 80-pound leaders. I might have 100-pound fluoro leaders on my trolling rigs, but and we use 3-foot leaders when we're trolling. That's the other thing.
Okay.
When I'm casting, it's usually 12-inch leaders, but I have learned this year to make my own steel leaders. And for throwing like those small jerk baits, small glide baits, small rattle baits, I'm making like 6-inch steel leaders.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, it depends. Like it's up to you as a fisherman. I don't feel like I need 100-pound all the time or 150, 160-pound leaders. I think you can get away with downsizing those. Now, if you get a big 40-pound fish on, that's not going to happen very often throughout the year. Yeah. But I would probably, if I had a little bass leader, 45-pound bass leader, I'd probably be worrying about it a little bit, but that's going to happen in general. Gotcha. So I don't know. Does that answer your question? I don't know if I answered the whole thing.
No, I think I think it really comes down, again, it's always, with everything with fishing is situational. It's going to be dependent on what you're throwing, the time of year, what size fish you're actually expecting to catch. Cause if you're expecting a big 48-incher, like you said, or, you're, something 2-foot, or what you need and realistically what you're going to need, in that situation, or it's just straight situational, so yeah, you did. It's just a matter of preference, I think, on top of that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of different opinions out there. I kind of take some of those from different areas and just kind of make them my own. But, a lot of guys have been doing this for a long time and they've been using certain things for a long time and it works.
Sure.
So. Sure.
No, I tell you what, the more we talk about this, the more I can't wait to look into Musky Inc. and start to learn and get with some of those folks there. I mean, it's been a species I haven't either dedicated the time to or I haven't had the knowledge to actually go out there and fish for. So it's definitely something I want to put on my radar this year. So this is all good info for me. So I was definitely glad we went ahead and chose to talk about muskie tonight. So thanks for the little education here. It's awesome.
Yeah, yeah, no problem. And again, hopefully this makes sense. But the one thing I'll tell you is, let me give you a little bit more background. I don't want to go too deep down this road, but I got into musky fishing starting by fishing for pike in Canada. I wanted to go on this Canadian adventure. I went up with my good friend Dan. We went up, we caught a ton of fish. It was my first experience with follows. Seeing, pike just follow your bait in, and just there were times where I was throwing a spinner bait and I had 2-3 fish hit it at once.
Wow.
It was insane. And, I came home from that trip, and knowing that he was a huge muskie fisherman, I was like, I want to do this. I want to catch a muskie. Like, to me, this is like the holy grail of fish in our area. Like, these are just big, beautiful, temperamental fish, and so I started fishing. Now, my first 2 years, I didn't catch a single fish, and I fished with him 15, 20 times, maybe 25 times. I couldn't even remember. But I had these instances where I lost fish. I was hooking and losing fish. I've made every single mistake you can possibly make as a new muskie angler. Anything from not tying the right knots. You remember Somerset Lake?
Mm-hmm.
So I went out muskie fishing there. One of my first times out by myself focusing on muskies. Second cast, I threw a top raider about 150 yards out into the lake. Line snapped. Bait went flying.
Oh.
I ended up getting it back, but I had to crawl through mud out in the middle of the lake to grab it. So, I had no idea what I was doing. But the point is, like, I didn't even know how to tie a knot that would allow me to throw a bigger bait. So those first couple of years, it was about learning how to tie the right knot. It was about learning about leaders. It was, I lost like 2 or 3 or even 4 fish before I realized, like, I'm not sharpening my hooks right. It's
sure.
just because you get these giant baits. And it's one of those things where when you're looking at this thing, you're like, these hooks are like 3, 4, 5/0 hooks.
Mm-hmm.
These aren't little bass hooks. So, you've got to keep them sharp. You've got to know how to sharpen these hooks. So, we lost 1 fish at the bag. The bait got caught on the top of the net and the fish rolled out. I lost my first 7 or 8 fish, and it was like this mission for me to catch a muskie after that. And it was nonstop grind, buying baits, buying gear. And I can remember we were fishing up on Chautauqua Lake, and I got my first fish after a tournament that we had fished. And I'll be honest with you, like, I broke down and actually cried when that fish hit the bag. I've never been so excited in my life. That was probably one of my favorite fishing moments. Seeing the fish like hit the bag, but kind of like roll out of the bag for a split second and then back in. It was like the weight of the world off of my chest. It was,
I feel you, man. I get it.
You grind for so many hours and you spend so much money chasing these fish sometimes. And, after I got that first one, it was kind of, I could go back to enjoying it, but
that's awesome. That's awesome.
It was a 38-inch fish. It was a natural fish for that lake. It was just feeling the weight of that fish, even though it was only a 38. Something I'll never forget. And since then, it's been really hard for me to fish for anything else,
That's awesome. That's awesome, dude. That's freaking sweet.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a lot of guys have similar experiences. But, it's once you get your first fish, it really, it can either turn you way off or it can just turn you way on. And I mean, you go full bore into it. And it's one of those things where you won't want to do anything else after you feel the power, those fish on the end of your line. So yeah, I've got so much respect for PA Fish and Boat for what they do. One of the videos that I love doing on YouTube was at the hatchery, seeing the muskie spawning process. It was amazing.
That's cool. Yeah. I'll have to check that one out. I haven't seen that one.
Yeah, it's again, you're interested in muskies or learn about them. The hatcheries they're amazing resources. You guys can go out there visit. Maybe after all this COVID stuff goes away, you can go out and visit. And there's tours, and they do like open houses and stuff. And the footage that I got was really exciting to me to be able to see that many fish, see that process. And then I got to stock with them one day too. And they will eventually get back to being able to, have people out to help them stock. So, it's something that they'll ask for, and you can even be a part of that at times. So it's just really cool to see these fish go from eggs that were spawned, into 8-inch muskies, and then ultimately into, 12, 16, 18-inch muskies to be stocked. I mean, it's just really cool.
It is. Yeah, for sure. That is cool, man. That is.
Yeah.
No, there's a lot to it. And this sport's supposed to be enjoyable. It's challenging at times. It's frustrating at times, but it's supposed to be enjoyable. And that's what this is all supposed to be about.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm not going to say I haven't been frustrated on the water, but sometimes you just really want to hold a big fish. And the funny thing, I tell my wife this all the time. She knows, like, like this year, it's different. I've caught a few fish, it's for her, it's like, okay, you caught a few fish this year. I'm happy for you. But, I'm getting to a point where it's like, all right, I haven't been out for 3 weeks. I'm starting to like bite my nails.
Yeah.
I'm starting to like get withdrawals from being out, and doing the thing. But it's fun. It is a lot of fun. It's a grind, but it is probably one of the most rewarding things you can do as a fisherman, in my opinion, especially here in the state of Pennsylvania, to be able to net one of those beautiful fish and, hold it, take your picture, but ultimately release it back. That's a big thing with catch and release. Release it back home so it can go get bigger and somebody else can catch it later on. So.
No, I agree, man. No, this has been awesome. So thanks again for coming on. This was really cool. I loved everything you had to say here tonight. You definitely shared a lot of good stuff, and I know a lot of people who are interested in musky fishing who, probably are like me, just haven't taken the plunge, who were like you at some point and just decided, it's time to get in. This is a good intro for it. So I'm really happy with what you shared tonight. So thanks for that. We're going to go ahead and cut this one off. Now, obviously, Ryan, we mentioned you have a YouTube channel. Can you tell everybody where they can find you at?
Yeah, sure. Just Fishing PA with Ryan Reed out on YouTube. If you have Facebook, you guys can send me a friend request. If you got Instagram, I think it's fishing_PA_Ryan Reed, something like that. I can't remember. But social media, you guys want to drop me a message, we can chat. I'm always open to talking about fishing.
Cool, man. Cool. Well, sounds good. I'll make sure to leave a link to that in the notes below. So that'll be cool. So thanks again for coming on. We're going to cut this one off here, guys.
Thanks for having me.